When we talk about awakening, it's a bit of a conundrum. The conundrum of how to talk about it, the conundrum of being in the position I'm in of speaking about it. Because there are always going to be some side effects to receiving the message or hearing the transmission, or however you want to talk about that. As I mentioned in my book, it's a very paradoxical subject. There are many paradoxes, but maybe the most prominent one is to even open my mouth about awakening. I'm talking about it using language that makes it sound like an event. It can also make it sound like something in your future. And the language I use to talk about awakening is received by an apparatus that itself not only uses language, but it identifies with language, right? Our mind identifies through language. So as I speak about it, there's just a side effect, and that is the thoughts are going to get spun up and rearrange themselves around what I'm saying. It's going to affect beliefs and so forth. But that's not actually the intention of the words, really. The intention of the words is to remind you of something that is not subject to thought. It's not subject to concepts. It's not subject to identifying. It's not subject to really anything, I suppose, because it is already everything. It is all-encompassing. It is subject and object. It's also not an event that I'm talking about, because if we speak in relative terms, if we speak in terms of a timeline, which is fine in and of itself, it's fine. But again, it has those kinds of side effects. If I speak in terms of an event, it's actually something like the opposite of an event when we talk about awakening, or when I talk about awakening, when I talk about Kensho. It's really kind of the opposite of an event. And I think this is an important point. I was actually interacting with someone yesterday, and it came up, and it's really struck me to say it this way, that it's very easy to hear awakening or something called awakening and hear it as something that's added onto your experience, or hear it as a new experience, or hear it as an ultimate experience. But it really isn't any of those. It's not at all, actually. It is transformational, but it's not a new experience. And it's not an added experience onto what already seems to be your experience. And it's also not an extreme, or extreme is not the right word. It's not the ultimate experience. The thought system is a system of comparison. It's always comparing, right, and judging. So when we talk about awakening as this fundamental transformation and identity, that thought system can easily take that and turn it into the ultimate experience. But it's really not any of that. This is why I think some simple, very simple types of terminology like Zen tends to use can be really helpful here. One is taking the backward step, because it is something more like taking the backward step. It's not taking the step into the next experience or into a greater experience, or into a more knowledgeable experience. That's another hang up that we get around this. But it's more like taking a step backwards out of that framework through which we interface with the world, thought, that convinces us that the way we're seeing the world through that framework is the actual world. We're taking a step back from that. So it's like, say we're wearing a mask. If you're wearing a mask made out of identifying with thoughts, let's say, or you're wearing a mask made out of concepts through which you see the world, or even filters or memories, right? And then you step back from the mask. It's like taking the mask off, but it's a bit like stepping back from it, because you can still see the eye holes. You can see the lens through which you were looking at the world. You can see the mask as a mask. It's not like the mask disappears. It's more like you step back from it. But you can also see the mechanism of masking. You can see the mechanism of identifying, and you can see that it's a mechanism. More importantly, you see that it's not all of what's been happening. It's not all of what is happening. It's a tiny part of the story. It was just it was almost like a hyper-focused experience through the lens of thought. And you step back from that and you realize a lot of things simultaneously. Or you realize several of a lot of possible aspects of this. And one is that to wear that mask of identity has a weight to it. It's heavy. It's uncomfortable. There's something about it that's just intrinsically uncomfortable. I won't go deeply into talking about suffering and unsatisfactoriness in this talk, but I will point out that I've said before, suffering really is the entry point to awakening. And sometimes people will disagree with that, even people who are very knowledgeable and have insight. But I think that the reason that is, or the reason people might disagree is because there is this other component, of course, of curiosity, maybe love, maybe devotion. Those can also come into play, but it's inherently and intrinsically uncomfortable to not experience reality directly, to experience it through a narrowed filter. However, for some people, they don't realize how uncomfortable it actually was till they step back from it. And for me, it was very uncomfortable. And I knew it was. I knew it was uncomfortable to live in this world of thought. And it felt like this internal pressure cooker was very unenjoyable. Being alive was unenjoyable for me for 24 years. So almost all the time. But even with that said, even though I was aware of that, I wasn't aware there was a different way really, but I was aware of that. Even with that said, once that happened, that backward step happened for me, I was even then very surprised at how much weight felt like it just disappeared or just dropped. So one component of the experience of wearing that mask of identity is that it's heavy. Yeah, it's heavy. It's unnecessarily heavy. I could talk about different reasons for that, or what I might consider different reasons for that. But two things I think that play into that. One is it requires a lot of effort, actually, to keep that mask on. It requires a lot of effort to keep believing in the mask. It requires a lot of effort to bind into thought after thought after thought after thought. Way more effort than we realize. It's an uncomfortable state, and it's a state that requires a certain kind of vigilance. But it also requires a certain kind of ignoring of what's actually happening. So you could say it's like a hide and seek game you're playing with yourself through thought. But it requires a lot of energy to do that, ongoing. And so that's one aspect of the heaviness. The other aspect of the heaviness, I think, is more energetic, like to believe you are something very discrete, meaning something that's very apart from small, in opposition to so many others, right? It's a contracted experience, and that feels heavy, feels dense. So those kind of play into that sense of heaviness. And when that heaviness is dropped, I remember the analogy that came to my mind when that happened was like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks. I didn't realize it. Almost as if someone was putting rocks in there every once in a while. It was just getting heavier and heavier throughout my life. But all of a sudden to take it off, it was like, oh. It wasn't just the relief of the backpack being taken off that was astounding. It was the fact that the lightness was natural. The lightness is natural to just being. The spontaneity is natural to just being. And that was unmistakable. It was obvious. It was far more obvious than anything I'd ever believed. I could see the illusion of belief. I could see the distortion of belief so clearly after that, once that weight was lifted. The other, or one other component of that insight, that initial insight, is it's related to what I just said, but it's the fact that this is uncaused. That awakeness, which is not a state, it's the opposite of a state. It's not an experience. It's in some sense the opposite of an experience. It's uncaused. You're not producing it. No one's produced. It's not. This doesn't need to be produced. It's just here. Which leads to the next part that is often there, not always, but it is the kind of cosmic joke of it all. Like how heavy that suffering was, how miserable, how real, and all of a sudden to see like it's actually never been happening. It's not like that, unless we insist on holding that mask on our face and reconstructing it over and over and over, thought after thought after thought. So it's almost laughable that how easy it is to let go of all that, how easy it is to recognize this moment is all there is. Not even a moment. This is all there is. Doesn't have a definition, doesn't have a framework, doesn't need a framework. Can be anything, can be any sensation, experience. It's like this, it's kind of like the ultimate shapeshifter, but it's requiring no effort. It's requiring no volition. And you could see that volition can be added, but it's an illusion. Agency can be added through thought, but it's an illusion. So it's kind of a cosmic joke, right? You even see that you could go back into a kind of suffering if you want to bind back into thoughts. And you will for a while, periodically. You'll play with the goggles, like as I described in my book. It's like you have those goggles on you've had on forever, and you take them off, and you realize, oh, I wasn't actually seeing reality. I was seeing filtered reality. Sometimes you put them back on, though, because there were things about those goggles that were familiar, maybe. And that's thought. There are things about thought that are familiar, and sometimes we're afraid of what's not familiar. We're afraid of the really seeing how big the wonder is, how big the awe is, how big the mystery really is. Can cause some fear, or how directly we feel things, how directly we feel sensations now and emotions. So we just run back into those goggles, grab them, put them on, put the mask back on. It's pacification. No. Yeah, pacification. Self-soothing, perhaps. But what we realize with some time is, with some experience of doing that again and again, after awakening, after seeing what's what, after recognizing what's what, we realize that it does kind of work, that self-soothing through thought and distraction, but it's like a credit card with 31% interest. Like the price is high, and it's not worth it. But we'll still do it for a while, right? We'll put the mask back on, take it off, put it on, play with it. At some point, you can't even find it anymore. At some point, you don't really have the mask. And when that happens, I'd say, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 2-3 people I've interacted with have had this happen, where it's like, now you can't find the mask, can't have it back, can't have the goggles back, but part of you is looking for them. Part of you is like, like, whoa, wait, where is it? And it can be really disorienting for a bit. You're feeling everything absolutely full on, fully, no mitigation of emotion, no mitigation of sensations, and it's just and clearly that even the mask is fake, and yet something in you, the habit force of trying to like scramble to grab the mask, it's like, and you can't, can be distressing a bit, or just really bizarre. But that settles pretty quick because it's not there. So at some point, you really don't have that ability to self-soothe through identifying. And there are ways to self-soothe without identifying, and we all know those. And so a lot of times what we learn there is to do that. Physical contact, touch, movement, practices, somatic practices, all that's fine. And then with time, this beautiful thing happens where I'll use the example of massage, right? Like I described that there certainly are practices that can soothe, self-soothe. That's not identifying. It's not distraction. So an example might be massage. But this beautiful thing happens after a while where the non-dual nature of experience or appearance, it's not an experience. Appearance is the only word I really have for this. That's not even right either. But the non-dual nature of, I guess I'll say phenomenon, but it's not really actually existing phenomena either. That's obvious. But it becomes so intimate that it's like being massaged all the time. But the cost for that is everything. This is really the deep end of the pool, to be honest. This is after some really deep realization and clarifying those deep insights, including anatta. So the cost of that is like no grasping anymore. But it's freedom. It's total alignment with what has been realized. And that what has been realized was that first shift, actually. It's just that you're not in alignment with it yet, right? That's the meing and being and putting the mask back on, taking it off, and on and on and on. And the habits of self-soothing through distraction and through identity and stuff, they're strong. They take a while to settle. But once they do, you're in a good place. But not for any of the reasons your mind could possibly think you are. So, realization isn't here to give you anything you want necessarily. It's not about that. But it will give you or show you freedom. It'll give you something better or show you something better than any mind state ever possibly could or any distraction ever possibly could. And it will pry your hands off of whatever you're grasping onto. Sometimes you'll just let go, which is great. And other times you won't. And your hands will be pried off of it. So this whole thing is a lesson in letting go. But it's also a lesson in the mechanism of holding on and how letting go and holding on are like interrelated. They're both like dependently originating illusions. There's no holding on or letting go possible. There's no entry point or exit point possible. And this is where relative and absolute are interpenetrated. It's like flying, free floating. But you're not directing it. It's self-directed. It's the universe flying, universe walking, universe sitting, universe speaking, universe hearing. That's total exertion.